Hey guys, it's Frank. Welcome back to my channel. It's hard to believe that October 1st would mark my 1 year mark living out in Calgary, and it's also kind of funny because by the time you actually see this, I likely would have already moved over back to Toronto. I can't tell whether or not this year flew by or not because when I look at it in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. But then I think about the winter months where I stayed home all day playing Pokemon all day, and I kept on asking myself, when will this all pass? Well, you might say that I could have spent my time a little bit better or even a little bit more productive, but you know what? My Charmander has now evolved into a Charizard, and clearly, if you can't tell, stole my sofa that used to be behind me. Okay, all jokes aside, in my previous video, I talked about how I was going to be leaving Calgary and moving over to Toronto. While I was in the process of selling my furniture, I thought about the importance of reflecting everything that has happened over the last year, and if I had to give advice to anyone that was thinking about moving here, what would I share? So with that in mind, in this week's video, I'm going to talk about what I learned 1 year living in Calgary, moving over from Toronto. What I'm about to share with you guys will be partly subjective just because it's coming from my perspective, but there are certainly components that you can take out of it that you can apply and save you a lot of time in the future. So before we dive into the video, give this video a good old smash, and in exchange, I will give you my super rare Pokemon card that I have been saving since I was 10 years old. Alright, so this one that I'm about to tell you is by far the most important lessons from all of them, and that is, do not move here until you secured work. I'll be the first to admit that I would sort of be eating my own words, just given that I technically moved here with no job lined up. But had I known that it was going to take me about 10 months before securing work out in Calgary, I simply would have never made the move out here. This is kind of tricky because even my dumb ego told me that my hustle and grind experience out in Toronto would give me an advantage out here in Calgary, and sadly it didn't. Especially knowing that this province is known for their oil and gas, and I had a tech background. Another thing that I wanted to say that I never really touched on my previous video is how the government is run out here in Alberta can be frustrating at times. Not to get too political, but you know, last year during the midst of the pandemic, you know, when people needed the most out of our healthcare workers, you know what the Alberta government decided to do? They decided to cut down on 11,000 healthcare worker jobs. So let me get this straight. There already exists a narrative that people shouldn't move to Calgary because of the oil and gas recession. The illness is still happening. And when you read articles like this, it's just unfitting because no matter how much you like the city of Calgary, you can't move here without having a job. So it just makes things that much harder for anyone that wants to move here. According to City News, Canada's unemployment rate in July fell to 7.5%. And I quote, "Despite the addition of new jobs, we're not at February 2020 level before the COVID-19 pandemic hit." And unfortunately for Calgary, according to Economic Development, shared that Calgary's unemployment rate still increased to 9.8% in July. I can tell you that moving is pretty stressful, and the last thing you want is an additional stress of not knowing how to pay your bills by the end of the month. The second item that I have to admit about Calgary is that this city is phenomenal if you're looking to settle or raise a family. I can see why the Calgary Herald listed the city as the most affordable market in Canada, stating that more millennials in the 30 to 39 age group are carrying mortgages in Calgary compared to the national average. I know that I have said this countless of times in my previous videos, but honest to God, if Calgary didn't have cold weather during the winter months, I truly believe this city could be one of the best cities in North America given its proximity to the mountains. You basically would have a Vancouver 2.0 minus the rain, but I guess eventually a lot of people will move here, and then that will raise housing prices, and then commuting would get that much worse too. Okay, more on present day Calgary. The reality is that housing prices, for simplicity's sake, is half the cost in big cities and even half the commuting time also in big cities. I found a nice article online by CBC Canada that shares what 716,000 can get you across Canada by comparing the different cities. And it's shocking to see how in Vancouver, for example, you can afford a fairly decent one bedroom, while if you scroll down a little bit further, you can see in Calgary, with the same dollar amount, you can afford this townhouse that includes 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. Not too easily to just say to drop everything and move over to Calgary because your dollar stretches further, but I can certainly recognize that if you're living in a 1 bedroom and you're looking to start a family, you might want more space down the road, and Vancouver or Toronto might not have enough space for you. If I had to think about a third lesson, it would have to be that what makes Calgary special and attractive isn't necessarily the city. Rather, it's actually the nature and the mountains. I know this is true because I thought about it really closely, and I asked myself, would I have moved here if there wasn't any mountains or hikes that was nearby the city? And the answer is obvious. The answer is no. And it's kind of funny, guys, because you know when you're on Instagram and you have your friends flexing on you that they're out and about visiting Calgary, and in their background you see sky blue water and you see a desktop wallpaper mountain view that's behind them. And unfortunately, guys, I have news for you. That's technically not even in Calgary. When people come visit Calgary, more times than not, they're actually here to go hiking. And that usually exists out in Banff or Canmore or just somewhere else that's not actually directly within the city. I have found that in general that anyone that lives out in Calgary has to have basically some level of interest going out for hikes. And because I'm leaving, I will share that some of my favorite hikes that I've been to is one called Sulphur Mountain and this other one called Howling Peak. Now, in terms of events that's actually within the city, by far the biggest event is no other than Calgary Stampede. And let me tell you guys, people love Stampede. Like, dead serious, love Stampede. To the point where during the summer, everywhere in Canada was pretty much on lockdown, and the Alberta government was like,
hey guys, I'll tell you what, I'll do you guys all a service, and I will open up Calgary Stampede if you guys all get your first vaccination. You do this and I'll open up everything.
And they did that. No negotiation, no fighting. They even forgot about their own theory that they could be potentially microchipped. And they all did it for Calgary Stampede. The last thing that I learned about my entire move from Toronto to Calgary, and as cliche as it sounds, is that you truly never know what it's like living out here in Calgary until you actually make the move out here. To give you some context, even before I made the move out to Calgary, I have been visiting this city almost every single summer, and I always just remember every time I visited how amazed I was about the city. It was clean, it didn't have rats, there was mountain views, there was just friendly people, and I even told myself that if I ever got the chance to move here, I would totally do it. If you think about Calgary on a paper basis, yeah, who wouldn't want to move to a city that has mountain views, 5% taxes, low commute times, and then just a more chilled vibe? I had a friend that even asked me at what point did I get the impression that Calgary might not be the right fit for me, and I said that it was in around the 6-month period that I started to think about what would be best for me long term. But even then, I still want to play things out because I knew eventually things would fall into place, and quite honestly it did. I ended up finding remote work. I knew that in 1 or 2 year time I could probably afford a home, and things in the city started to open, but even despite having the golden keys, I just knew that the city just was no longer the right fit for me. To wrap up this video, if there was a single advice that I wanted to share with you guys, and if you're thinking or considering moving to Calgary, it would have to be the first one that I said earlier in this video, and that is securing work before actually moving out here to Calgary. Because despite all the outdoor activities that exist out here, or how cool it is to flex on your friends that you live beside the mountains, it's tough to enjoy any of these when you are out of work and broke like I was back in the day. And having been through and knowing about Calgary's job economy, it's tough to know when you'll actually find placement. So it may be in your best interest to apply within the city wherever you're currently based out of, and should you ever find placement, make a decision from there on out. Calgary has been an amazing experience, and I have learned so much over the last year, not only about the city, but a little bit more about myself and what I value. And I think that's the biggest lesson of it all. But anyhow, with that said, guys, as always, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching and following my millennial journey. I'm super excited to make that move over to Toronto. Hit that subscribe button, and I guess I'll see you guys all in my next video. Peace.